like anything, it's kind of, there's not really one answer in a way. There were sequences that were technical. There were sequences, obviously, that were emotional. But in a way, there was just, I think, the level of the focus of the film, and I think for me, the focus of the film was always on Solomon Northup and attempting to connect as much as I could to his journey and his character. Part of that was laid out in his biography, and so there were a lot of clues there to his very specific characteristics. But in some of the things that he endured, I was able to then sort of try and connect in any way that I could to how he may have felt in any given moment, and that was a real privilege in a way, to feel the sense of any kind of connection to what he went through, seeing as we were trying to do some of the sequences, as close as we could possibly do to what he describes in the book. So that felt in a way, although emotional, also kind of connected to his experience, connected to him, which gave it a very different feeling for me.
Well, yeah, there were times when it was sort of emotionally sort of impactful, but I think what we had was a wonderful crew. I mean, the support of the crew from the catering, as I said before, catering to makeup, wardrobe, hair, camera department, sound department, gaffers, electricians, grips. I mean, all of us came together, and it was almost like it was our film. So with that kind of support, structure, that kind of camaraderie, that kind of family, everyone having a claim on the film, a stake in the film, it was such a supportive atmosphere that it allowed the actors to sort of, go there, as it were, to risk and to try and to fail, of course, and to feel better and to sort of go for it, whatever it is what they were trying to go for. There were no restrictions. There was no censorship, and that environment allowed that to happen. And I think it was beautiful. It was really a lot of love on that set. It was beautiful. I mean, if it's a hard day, everyone would go out together, everyone would eat together. It was wonderful. It was a great time. Great time making that movie.
On some levels, I mean, it feels like a very definitively American story. Obviously, it's a human story, but it is also an American story. How did you approach that as two London boys, back on home turf now, and you're among friends, so you can speak freely about it?
Well, it's a world story. It's a world story. It's not necessarily an American story as such. I mean, yes, it takes place in the United States, but it's a world story because it has to do with slavery, and slavery was a world world industry as such. I chose that particular story. I was looking for when I was researching those slave stories at that time, and that's the story that sort of struck me. So Solomon Northup's story, and I, as I said before, I couldn't believe I hadn't come across this story or this book before. I couldn't believe it, and I felt really stupid. But then I realized no one else had. So it was always about the narrative and the story, and wherever it took place in the world, it didn't really matter. It was about the subject I wanted to talk about, which was slavery.
Yeah, for me, it always felt that there was a kind of, by definition, there's an international element to it, even American slavery, because the slaves weren't from America. So you kind of have, there's, always an international idea with this thing. And so, and as I learnt about slavery, that's the way in which I learnt about it. I learnt about it in terms of Africa, in terms of the West Indies, in terms of Britain, in terms of America. And South America, so I always had that in my head. I felt like it was a very American story, absolutely, but I felt that there was something correct about an international group of people in a way, even though 97% of the people who were involved in this movie and made this movie are Americans, but that there was an element of something international about it, which I felt really reflected something about the international nature of this event, this world event.
Were you ever worried that you were going too far, or were you worried that maybe you didn't go far enough in terms of some of the scenes?
Well, if I was to make the book, that was pretty extreme, and the book is pretty extreme. But my responsibility is this: either I'm making a film about slavery or I'm not. And I decided I wanted to make a film about slavery. And if you make a film about slavery, you have to understand why people were incarcerated in this particular way, incarcerated, were in bondage in this kind of way for 400 years. It was through mental and physical torture, in a way. And, it's a world event. There's a huge hole in the canon of film. Sometimes there's a huge hole in people's minds that they don't want to think about. But in order to bring it to the fore, people have to remember, why I, as an individual, am sitting here today. I'm here as an individual because some members of my family went through slavery. Fact. And it's to be respected. That's what I say, really.
Can you explain the audition process, how Mr. Ejiofor got the role, and the rest of the cast as well?
It's a big cast, so I'll just do Chiwetel. We knew each other before, and as far as I was concerned, as soon as I read the book, there was only one actor who could play it, was Chiwetel. As I said before, there's some kind of, there's a stature, there's a class, there's a dignity to him, which I needed, and which Solomon needed. He needed to be portrayed in that way, because that was Solomon Northup, and Chiwetel is just a great actor, and also he reminds me of Hannibal Fonte or Silly Potty. There's some kind of stature to him that sort of translates on screen, and I think that's the sentence, that translate on screen, and that's why I chose him. It's just it's one in a million.
Hi, Steve. I just wondered, in relation to that, your relationship then with Michael Fassbender, and obviously a very close relationship with each other. I wondered if you could expand a little bit on how you work together and how well you work together. And also there were comments, I know, in the last few days that Michael said he wouldn't play the Oscar game, and there's talk of Oscar nominations with this film. So I just wondered how you felt about that and the whole idea of this Oscar game.
Well, me and Michael go back, obviously, a while back, since 2007, when I first met him at an audition for Hunger. Obviously, our relationship has grown and hopefully blossomed into something which is I value it more than a lot of things in my life. I value it tremendously. He's an artist. He's an amazing artist, and he's one. Again, he's just a force to be reckoned with. There's some kind of magic he has, and he brings on set. I mean, he's the kind of guy that when he leaves the set, it was very people are crying. He has some kind of spirit. Anyway, as far as campaigning or not campaigning, his campaign is on that screen. That's Michael Fassbender's Oscar campaign. There's nothing much more. He's done his thing. That's it.
I've got a question for Steve. I really like the use of music in the film, and Hans Zimmer is probably one of the biggest composers right now. He's done everything from Pirates to Kung Fu Panda. I wondered why he was chosen to write the music for the film, and the process you went through in order to get the fabulous score that you got in the end.
I just rang him up. I heard that he was as you do. We had the kind of chat before around Hunger. Shame at one point. So I just rang him up and I said to him, Hans, listen, I'm doing this film. There's no money, and he said, Steve, I'm destroying the world. So, oh my God, you get worried, obviously, when he says that. And moving on swiftly. And he was basically making Superman at the time. And he said to me, I'm destroying the world. So, but Hans, is it possible that you can think about this idea? I'll do it. He said, I'll do it. That's it. And that was it. So I just put, thank you, put the phone down. Okay. And from there, we had a lot of discussions. I don't know, he's a very interesting, Hans is a fantastic guy. I'm not just, everyone seems to be in life fantastic, but guess what? I choose wisely. He is just, he's a fantastic guy. We had like 2 conversations for 5 hours at his place, then 2 other conversations for about 3 hours on the phone, seriously. And then I came to his studio and he does this. Ding! Oh, wow. It was all that conversation led to a couple of notes. So he has to be submerged in the narrative so deeply that he comes out in another way, translates in him through sound. So that's kind of focus and concentration Hans Zimmer has. It's an incredible guy.
Chiwetel, I just have a quick question for you actually, which was that Solomon, what comes through most strikingly about Solomon is that he's not a symbol, he's not a cipher, he's a character, he's an individual. How did you go about developing that kind of characterization?
Well, actually, it took, it didn't come as easily to, that easily to me. I when I first read the script, I definitely saw the story of a man going through an extraordinary circumstance. I didn't necessarily see Solomon that first time. It wasn't actually until I read the book and then went back to the script, that I suddenly realized, it was obvious in a way, but I realized that this was actually the story of Solomon Northup, and my responsibility was to simply tell his story. I'd seen it initially as as telling a story and feeling the responsibility of telling a story about the slave experience or something, or telling one of the few stories, I think, not one of the only stories in cinema, are from inside the slave experience. And so that, was a bit of a hurdle to me, trying to get my head around how to tell a story that wide through this one person, until, of course, like in these things, you realize you don't have to do that. You don't have to tell the whole story of slavery somehow. But just the story of Solomon Northup. And so the book was then very revealing in terms of his character, and I realized that his worldview and the way that he approached the world and the way he approached other people, the way he approached these circumstances was remarkable, actually. Because of I've tried to work out exactly what his specific characteristics are, but I think that they're mainly to do with this extraordinary reflex of survival and love of life, as well as an absence of hatred that he utilizes, that he's able to sort of continue through this system because he gets rid of anything that is not useful to his survival, both physically and mentally. And it's an extraordinary paring down of all those elements that allows him to navigate this time.
We talked before about uncomfortable moments in the film. Like, were there any moments when you first were reading the book or seeing the script that you were really concerned about going through with? And Steve, you've mentioned before about actors doing the job. Like, were there, in the same sort of way, were there any scenes that you were concerned putting your actors through?
Well, to me, I just thought when I read it, I was just stunned by it, and I just thought that this, as a piece, you're going to have to just trust it, As an actor, you're just going to have to just slip down the rabbit hole and see what happens, because there was just no other way of telling the story, and it's not like I wasn't aware of Steve and his films, you know what I mean? So I knew that he would go to all the places that you'd have to go to, and that's what I wanted, to tell this story. I just thought that that's the only way. I mean, it comes back to something we were talking about earlier. It's the only, in a way, you can't tell a story about slavery unless you tell it, that's it. And so you're going to have to, it's like, people talk about sort of violence and stuff, but it's sort of weird to me because it's a strange handicap if you can't talk about violence in a film about slavery. You're not going to do justice to any of the people involved. You're not saying I'm going to do justice to Solomon Northup and what he went through. It's like doing that about the Second World War or something, but you can't shoot anybody. It's not. You can't tell these stories without these major parts of what they are. And I read that, and I read into that. I read into the script that there was obviously going to be this kind of these sort of struggles that he went through, and I wanted to embrace that. I was excited about that.
I wanted to ask Steve, now that he has done such good movies, was it difficult to get the money from American industry as a black man?
Interesting question. No, it wasn't. It wasn't difficult at all. I think I was very Plan B, the production company behind me, were very supportive, and Brad Pitt, of course, was extra supportive. I had great people helping, Fox, Searchlight, Alan Molcher, producer, and also Brad Weston. There was a group of people who came together with the money because they believed in the film and believed in me. So that was great. And they believed in the subject, more importantly. So no, it wasn't as difficult as maybe people thought. No.
When you approached this role in your mind, how did you go about ensuring the audience stayed attached and engaged with your character when essentially he's becoming more introvert and throughout that hardship until the final scenes?
I think because when I I had when I first read this screenplay and when I first read the book, I had a very immersive experience with it, which was in a way that I just felt like I was reading, like I was observing something, just reading a book or reading a script, and then at a certain point, and I don't even know exactly when that is, it was like I was inside the experience with him, So certain things would say happen to him or whatever, and I would feel like I was just very emotionally connected, and I felt like there's something about it that is very immersive, and I thought very immediately immersive because I suppose in a way we can all relate to that, or we can all kind of easily understand some of the sense of just being ripped away from everything that you hold dear, and then put in this kind of like Alice in Wonderland, slip down the rabbit hole into this kind of bizarre universe that he's sort of walking you through. And I felt that the power of that could be conveyed in any medium. I think that's why it's such a strong book, and why it's such a strong screenplay, is because actually what Solomon is relating is something that people kind of quickly get on board with, quite quickly understand, so I wasn't worried about that in a way, and so I didn't feel like it was my job to try and carry anybody through it, which I thought might have been interrupting. I just felt like if I kept close to Solomon and told his story, that I kind of trusted in the narrative. Of course, I trusted in Steve, and I felt like that was the way that people would connect to it.